CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It's a language that we use to apply styling to an existing HTML tag. And the attribute I'm going to use is the style attribute. And if you will hit Control Space, okay, on every operating system, you will get a list by Visual Studio Code, which is very cool. This is a list of all of the CSS properties or stylings that you can apply to an HTML tag. Okay, it's a very large list, but once you're starting to use them, you're getting familiar with more and more of them, and you will remember them. The one that I'm going to use is the color. Okay, and I'm using color. I'm specifying what type of CSS property I want to use, following by some color value. So I'm going to use the literal value of the color, red. So what I'm saying here, I'm using CSS to apply the color red to this text here, to the H1 tag. I will save the file, go to my website, refresh the page, and you can see that the title is with the color red. Okay, so if I'll go here, you see I have this CSS applied, color red, and you can see that I see the color red, but I don't see the text itself of the CSS. This is because we're using an attribute, which is something, a place to add some metadata to a tag that we don't want to display the text to the user, but we want the browser to use this information to do something. In this case is to apply some kind of styling. Another cool thing I can do is if I go to this paragraph, I will also add style and I will add background. Okay, and here let's do gray. Let's not do semicolon here. I'll refresh the page and I will get this gray background over my paragraph. Okay, this is my paragraph and it has a gray background. And I want to do, let's see, checkers board. Okay, so this is how a checkers board looks like. And I will try to implement not exactly that. I won't do all of these wood patterns here. I will do just black and white, but I will try to implement something like that using HTML and CSS. Now, the way I'm going to do it is in various techniques, and through those techniques, I want to show you something which is very powerful in CSS. Let me go over here. Let's skip all of those. Where is it? Oh, this one, the display property. Okay, so CSS is something which is called a display property. Just like we have color property, background that we saw now, we also have display. And I'm going to use display block and display inline, okay, for now. And then I will also show you other kinds of display. The reason that I want to use this checkers example, because I think it's a very good example to try to implement it with HTML and CSS using some display property in CSS, and I will explain while I'm coding. So hopefully it will make sense what I'm doing. Okay, so let's start. Let's go over to our folder where we have our file, and I don't want to delete it. So let's just create a new website. Let's call it checkers.html. Okay, and like any other website, I want to start with an HTML tag. Now, instead of writing HTML, head, body, etc., which is kind of the basic template of every HTML, right? For every HTML, we have to have those. So one cool shortcut that I have in VS Code, just using exclamation mark, and I have this autocomplete, enter, and it creates some HTML for me. Now, one thing you can see, it adds this doc type, which you can ignore for now, but it usually should be here. It adds a language, English, which is another type of metadata, right? Remember, attributes are metadatas that we have on our HTML. You can Google what is the lang attribute, what it does. And we have other types of meta tags. Okay, again, it's inside the head tag, so this won't be displayed to the user. This is something to be used by the browser, some type of information that the browser can use to do something. Okay, so inside this head tag, this body tag, let me close this index. Always jumps. I want to implement those checkers. Let's try to implement those two squares. Now, the way I'm going to implement those two squares, it's using a div tag. Okay, I'm going to use a div tag. And for another square, I'm going to use another div tag. The first step that I'm going to do, now let me save the file. Let me do it step by step. I will save the file now. Go over here to the browser, open Finder in the desktop, open a new tab, and put the checkers here. Now let me do inspect. And you can see I have my HTML here with everything that we created, but I don't see anything because I just have two empty div tags. I don't want them to be empty. I want to have something inside. I want them to be presentable. Now, I don't want to add any text, right? Because this is a checkers board. There is no text inside. It's just squares of white and black. And let's see here in the checkers, the first one is white. So let's go here. Let's put style and background white. Okay. And again, it won't do anything. Let me refresh. I don't see anything changes. Why is that? Because all of the background is white. So it doesn't really make sense, but I just put it there so we'll have easier distinction between the two squares. And for the other div, I can do style, and using CSS, I can do background black. And I'll refresh the page, and again, I don't see anything. Why don't I see anything? I will go over those divs, and one cool thing I can use in the developer tools, doesn't matter on which divs I'm choosing, and go here to the Computed tab. And the Computed tab will tell me what is the width and height of the div. It tells me the width is 1070 pixels and the height is 0. There is no height to this div. So even if it has some background, I can't see it. The question is, how can I change it? I want to give it some type of width and height. And again, if you will take a look at the checkers board, it has the same width and height, right? Because those are squares. So we need to have the same width and height. So we'll go here, and the way that I'm applying width and height is inside CSS. Now, if I want to apply more than one property, I don't want to have just background. I also want to have width and height. I need to use a semicolon. I have to use it. This is how I can separate between different properties. So we'll do width, and let's say 50 pixels. Maybe we will change it. And height, 50 pixels. Let's do the same. Let me copy it and paste it here. And go back. Refresh the page. And now I see something. Okay, so I have something, which is great. Let's see what I have. I will go over the first element. And it's 50 pixels by 50 pixels. And you can, even if when I'm going over it with the mouse, you can look to the left and see that the blue area, it's the div itself. And it even tells me there is this tooltip to the bottom that tells me it's 50 over 50, 50 pixels over 50 pixels. And of course, the background is right, so we don't see anything. But you can also see there is some orange area to the right. Okay, we'll see what it means. To the bottom, I have the other div. So the div is also 50 pixels by 50 pixels. And it also has this orange area to the right. Okay? So I kind of have what I want, kind of, right? It's not exactly what I want, but I'm starting. There is another step towards building these checkers. I can create boxes in the colors I want. Now, one cool thing about the DevTools is that we can even inspect the CSS. So I have this CSS here that I added as the style attribute, and I can see it down here. I can see the exact value, background, width, and height of my elements. One cool thing I can do with it, I can play with those values. So maybe instead of black, I want to have red. And you can see here to the left that it changed for red. Now, if I'm changing a value here, remember, this is just a playground. It is not changed in my code. You see that the file didn't change. The browser cannot change the file. The browser can only read the file. So whatever I'm changing here, it's changed only on this specific website. If I want to apply it to my code, I have to take this value and write it here and save it. Okay, so this is just a playground. Once you're done playing in your, you want to have what you're seeing in the code that you changed, you have to copy it and paste it in your file, and of course save it, and then you will have it saved for later. Another thing you can see under all of the CSS that we wrote right here, we have another CSS here. And this CSS, it's called the user agent style sheet. Or in plain English, this is the default CSS of a div tag. Almost every HTML element has some default CSS applied to it by the browser. The browser has default CSS for every element. Let me go to the other website that we have here, that we created before, and let me go over the H1. And you see the H1 has the CSS that we created before, the color red. This is what we have here over the code. And it also has some default CSS applied to it. One of those is the font size. So we want H1, the header one, to be larger than other text. The other one is font weight bold, right? We want the text to be bold because it's a title. Let me do the same over the A tag. So again, the A tag has some default CSS applied to it. For example, text decoration underline. So we will have some underline to a link. So this is some default CSS that we are getting for free, in quotes, by the browser. Okay. So the next part that I want to explain is this display block. One thing you can see that even though those two divs has 50 pixels height and 50 pixels width, they're taking the entire row. The first div, even though it's white, let me change it to green. Let me zoom in a little bit. So the first div, even though the width and height of it is only 50 pixels, it blocks the entire row. What does it mean that it blocks the entire row? It means that it starts at the beginning of the row and ends at the end of the row. The same applies for the other div. So the only default CSS that the div tag has is this display block. And this display block, again, means that the HTML element starts at the beginning of the row and ends at the end of the row. The question is, can we change it? And the answer is we can. Of course, we can apply our own CSS. We can override, can replace this default value.